Hey everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Hollywood Critics Association Moon Knight After Show. That is a mouthful. I will get used to it probably by the final episode, I'll get used to it. My name is Tessa Smith. You guys can find me everywhere at Mama's Geeky, online at mamasgeeky.com, Mama's Geeky, Twitter, Instagram, pretty much everywhere, here on YouTube. I'm joined by two lovely co-hosts. We'll be with you every week to break down this show that is so insane. I can't wait to start talking about it. Andrea, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you?
Hi, I'm Andrea. You can find me writing at Entertainment Weekly. Sometimes I'm writing at IGN. The EW is currently my entertainment home right now. So most of my thoughts and ramblings will probably be on EW.com or mostly on my Twitter, which is A-Towers, or my Instagram, which is _Andrea Towers, because everyone loves underscores because everyone takes your name everywhere.
Exactly. It's true. Michael, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you?
Hi. So I'm Michael Lee, and I write for a bunch of websites from That's It LA to We Live Entertainment and Nerds of Color and geeksofdoom.com. There's a lot of stuff I write for. So yeah. And You can find me at there. So yeah.
I know. I'm always like, which way am I going?
It's down here somewhere. Oh,
it's down here somewhere. All right. So,
right? Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, the first episode of Moon Knight, I've got to warn you guys, spoilers. Okay. The after show is always going to be ridiculously filled with spoilers. So if you haven't watched yet, just subscribe and come back. We'll be here. This video will be here and go watch it because it's insane. So first thing we're going to talk about is just our overall thoughts on this show. Now, we did all full disclosure get the first 4 episodes. We are sticking to just spoilers for the first episode. This episode, it's just the first episode. But holy cow, I loved just the horror elements that they brought. Like, horror is here. It's in the MCU. They aren't even playing around. Andrea, how did you feel about just the horror elements that they threw into the show?
I loved it. So one of my favorite things about the Disney Plus series, which I think has been everyone's favorite thing about the Disney Plus series, is that it's every show has been so different, like so distinctly different, just in what in like the types of things they deal with and the characters and the tones and like the swings they're taking in the Marvel universe. And like, obviously I would say Moon Knight's probably the biggest departure from like anything we've seen in Marvel so far, even like across the films. And it threw me so much because I know going in, be prepared for like bizarre and weird and crazy, but I didn't expect just how much of it was going to touch on those like horror aspects and those like thriller type aspects. And it was just it was really fun. And as like a full disclosure, like every other show that's come out so far, I've been really familiar with. If I'm not familiar with the character, I'm familiar with like their comic stories and like vice versa. And Moon Knight is the first show that like I didn't really know the comic. I didn't really know the character. Like, I read up on what I needed to read up about, to know going into the show. But it's the first show that I've gone into, like, I don't know really the backstory that well, I don't have a history with the character that's been like reading their stuff or, anything. So it was like the elements of this is something new and completely different, plus the fact that this character is completely new to me was really fun. And I think that made it even more like, oh my God, this is such a distinct show.
Yeah. So for me, same thing. I barely knew the comics. I knew a little bit. I started to dive into it when I knew the show was coming, but not nearly as much as like, spending a lot of time being invested in characters. Let's put it that way. Right. So, but the end of this episode, which we will get there, I was like terrified. Like, I was scared. I was like, what is going on in here? Michael Lee, how did you feel about just the horror that Marvel has brought to this show?
I think it's really refreshing to see them take the horror genre to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it's like everyone's been saying so far, it's something that they have not done before, and that's what's so new and that keeps things moving for it and keeps us engaged in throughout this whole story development as we shift away from the whole Infinity Saga. And this is so with that horror element, it just keeps us surprised, like how far can they push that envelope and still stay true to the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe, and while keeping everything not too like bloody or gory, but it goes there. Actually, that's what surprised me the most.
Yeah.
And to see them just say, Kevin Feige and the rest of the, I guess, Disney people as well, say, you know what, this is good. This is what we're gonna go with, and I'm like, wow, I'm really surprised, and this is a good thing actually. So I am really happy that they're willing to go this far, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
Yeah, it's definitely refreshing, right? And it feels new, but it still felt Marvel to me. I've seen a lot of people say it feels DC. To me, it still felt Marvel, but it was like really pushing the envelope Marvel. I did love seeing blood and gore, like actually in here, because I was surprised, like you said, there's a moment in this episode where he's got his hand up and there's like blood all over his hand, and you're like, they're doing it. Okay, let's go.
Definitely different. It's definitely going further, I think, than other shows have. And I hope that means that like there's good stuff coming down the line for future Disney Plus shows or even future MCU movies that are going to be like a little darker and a little more out there.
Yeah, I think Doctor Strange too, they've said, is supposed to be like horror-esque. So we'll see. If this is any indication, you guys, sign me up. I'm all in. But let's talk about Oscar Isaac as a whole here, because he's literally playing opposite himself. Like, he is playing different characters in the blink of an eye. He will change accents, mannerisms, like his entire core character. And of course, he's an actor, so yes, he can do that. But to see him do it in just moment to moment in one show is incredible. Andrea, what did you think of Oscar's performance overall?
So I have been a fan of Oscar for a while. So everyone loves him in Star Wars, which I have loved him in Star Wars. I have loved Oscar Isaac since the Bourne Legacy, which I love for different reasons, and everyone forgets he's in that. So I'm like, he is someone you appreciate in those tiny roles. But he impressed me so much. And, like I said, I wasn't familiar with the character. So when he was cast, I couldn't say like, oh, he's going to make the perfect Moon Knight, because, not like when like Haley was cast as Kate or, something like that. Like, I knew the character very well, but I mean, literally when I was watching my screeners, I just kept saying over and over, like, I love Oscar Isaac so much. He's just so good at what he does. And like what you were talking about with the accent switching, and also like I'm so obsessed with the little timid like English accent and how he's so socially awkward. And like I want to give him the biggest hug. Like, and the fact that he can go from that to like mercenary, Mark, it's just incredible. Like, I had so much fun watching him, and I really was impressed with what he was able to bring to the role. Because it's not easy. He makes it look really easy. It's not easy. It can't be easy.
No, there's no way. I agree. I know. I was like, I just want to hug Steven. Like, Steven, it's okay. It's okay. People like you. I'm going to give you a hug. Michael Lee, how did you feel about Oscar?
I said in a tweet, I compared it to Lupita Nyong'o's performance in Us, because it's like but for this one, it's slightly different because he's inhabiting one body. So rather than playing off of each other the way they do, or he's playing off to himself in a reflection. So I thought it was incredible. It just shows how much range the both of them have. And it's like Andrew was alluding to, just to be able to go from one character to the next while still being in that place, it's just incredible. And yes, it's acting, but the way that he does it with all those vocal nuances, those body gestures and body language itself, it just shows like how incredible he is, dedication and understanding of each character it is. So
yeah, he's so good. And then the other thing I want to talk about before we dive into like an actual recap moment by moment of the episode is all the Egyptian mythology layers that this show brought, because I knew that was a part of Moon Knight, but it's something I don't know a lot about. So I thought it was kind of interesting and fun to kind of learn about these gods. And then you look it up and I'm like, oh no, they're really perfectly portraying this. Andrea, how did you feel about all the Egyptian mythology sprinkled throughout the series?
I thought it's really cool. And I really enjoy that they're trying to bring a very authentic and very kind of, full bodied, I guess is the word, vibe to the show, because I think it would be very easy to, because like you said, the character has that history, but I think it would have been very easy to kind of allude to that or just like push it off to the side. But they really made it a huge part of the mythology. And as we talk about more of these episodes week after week, we will get into that, how much, you get into that mythology. But I loved it. And I think it's what helps make the show like so different. We've never really had anything that's been so culturally tied to something like that before. I don't think.
Yeah, not as deep
not
as
like
this,
in
I
this
don't think.
way, yeah.
Yeah, and then even during the press junket, they had said, I think it was Oscar said something about they said it in London because like everybody's in New York. So like they've already been in New York with every single show they've ever done. So let's put it somewhere else. But what did you think about the Egyptian tie-ins, Michael Lee?
I think it's wonderful. It brings a cultural nuance to a show that's been, like we've been saying, so tied to New York. And the fact that you have an Egyptian director directing 4 of the episodes, he brings more of an authenticity to this, to the culture itself, rather than what a regular Caucasian or white person would do, as we have seen before. So he brings more, like I said, an authenticity and more of a, how Egyptian or Egypt culture should be portrayed now. Basically, that's what I was trying to say, because so much of it has been portrayed as old Middle Age sort of thing, outdated, and so it's refreshing, and I can't wait to see how Egyptian is portrayed in the MCU in a more current time.
Yeah, and I do feel like Moon Knight isn't going anywhere. Hopefully he ends up in a movie or in other episodes of other shows somewhere. So hopefully we do get a lot more of that, and then an Egyptian tie-in overall into the entire MCU. But let's talk about the episode. So when it started off, right, we have Oscar as Steven, which I thought was a great way to start it because, and I know a lot of people were upset. Honestly, comic readers I saw on Twitter are upset knowing like Stephen Grant is supposedly the main one because Mark Spector is like the main persona in the comics. So people were a little upset about that. But I love Steven, and I just love how Steven's so naive at the beginning. Like, oh, I have this sleeping disorder and I just need to tie myself to my bed. Like, how is that normal? I would never be like, oh, I'm just going to tie myself to the bed, and when I wake up, I'll be fine. I don't know. Andrea, how did you feel about just this introduction to Steven and his kind of thoughts on what happens to him at night?
I think so. Between this and the opening, like the cold open, between that and the way that they were showing like how they deal with his insomnia, how he wakes up at night and all of that. I think it was a whiplash in the best way. Like they really throw you into this show. Yeah. And I think that's like the best way that I can describe that, is that like you don't like know what you're watching. Even like when I was watching the opening and I was watching the whole the whole introduction to his character, it's like I like didn't know what was going on. I'm like, so are you showing him like, are you showing us like a backstory? Are you showing us like what he's doing now? Are you showing us context that we need to? Oh, but I was so intrigued. But it was the way that it was, like, I guess shown to us was it was just different and fun. And I love that we got. I love that we got that introduction in that way. And also, I mean, I think for the people that had those thoughts about like Steven being more of a main character than Mark. I mean, I think as the show proves, you can't really have one without the other. And like having so much of Steven in the first episode is like, that helps you like that only helps you with your understanding of like who the character is. And when Mark finally comes out, like why it's such a a big difference, and I think it helps like people. It will help people empathize with the character, because like not a lot of people are going to know this character, like general Disney Plus viewers.
Right. And I think it's smart to start with Steven, because he's definitely the easier one to like relate to, and kind of like we said, we just want to give him a hug, right? You're like, oh, Steven. And then Mark comes out and you're like, whoa, who's this? This guy, he's a little intense at first. But Michael Lee, how did you feel about just this introduction to Steven, kind of seeing him go to work and talking about how he just chains himself to bed at night?
The whole aspect of starting off with Steven, I think it's perfect, because as we've all been alluding to, it's kind of the guy that it's almost the everyman, sort of the guy we can connect with immediately, because who hasn't had trouble sleeping at night, or who hasn't had trouble being overcoming their social awkwardness sometimes. And it's so refreshing to see a character that you wouldn't expect to be a hero of sorts, and just to see him, I'm trying to think of the word, but just to see him be how he interacts with other people, how he's so timid and pushed around a lot. And I mean, we've all been through those experiences, and I just found myself relating more and more. It's like, I just would like to be said, give a hug to this guy. he needs a friend, and no one wants to be his friend. And it's like, it's just so awful. But it just loosens you up. It's like, and then when that moment comes, and we'll talk about it later, but when that moment comes, it's like, wow, I just did not see that coming. So yeah.
Starting the Oscar Isaac hug.
Yes, I know. We're all just gonna go hug him. I mean, I'll hug Oscar Isaac anyway, but sure, as Steven, why not? But I love how his first moment you see him wake up at after he's switched to Mark, the first time we actually see it, his jaw's smashed and his head's in the ground in the grass, and then he's waving at these people up in the thing, and they start shooting at him, and he's like, what is going on? Conchu shows up, which is, that voice is so terrifying, and he's just like, idiots back, and you're like, what is happening? Just throwing us all in here. Andrea, how did you feel in that moment?
So we're talking about the horror stuff, and I think that's the first time I really had that moment, because when he picks himself up on the floor and he has to relocate his jaw and all that, and I'm just like, oh, we're going there with this is the intense WTF, what just happened. And then having that voice come out of nowhere, and also having him say stuff like that, oh, the idiot's back, and I'm like, should I be laughing at this? Because it does kind of have a humor, there are moments where you get that Marvel, that patented Marvel humor.
Mm-hmm.
But I was kind of not that I was laughing, that sounds bad, but when he was confused and they started shooting at him, and it's you feel that whole uncomfortableness of I don't know what's going on. Should I be concerned for him? Is this is this funny? Is this not funny? And that's basically can sum up my feelings for most of the first episode.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Michael Lee, how did you feel about him popping his jaw back into place and then having to run away from these people?
That whole transition from when he goes to sleep to when he wakes up with a broken jaw, as Steven was, I was just as confused, what's going on? How did he get from point A to point G, I guess? Because it was just all perplexing. He's okay, well, this is interesting. And then he starts to hear these voices. F. Murray Abraham's voice work is just stupendous in this, by the way. It caught me off guard when he said wake up, or something the idiot's in control. I was like, what's going on? How come I can't see this voice? And I'm just as scared as Steven is at the moment. And when he waves to all the other mercenaries, or Harrow's men, it was like, oh my god. So it's oh, he's just friendly casual wave, and then all of a sudden they start shooting at him. What's going on? I was really that was drawing me in further and further in. And I was just like, okay, I'm sold, because I like this whole play on, not knowing or what's going on, and this whole confusion aspect, because so much of what's come before it has been, streamlined and very straightforward, but here it's just very unpredictable, and that's what I liked about it.
Yeah, and to play off of that, what I love is how they edited the way he would change between Steven and Mark, like the flashes, and then it's one person and then it's another person. I thought there's a fantastic choice to edit it like that, because it does also make the viewer kind of feel like, wait, what's going on? Who's who? Like, who's this going to be? And then all of a sudden, it's flashing, and all of a sudden he's got a gun in his hand, and he's like, what happened? And like someone shot in the head, and you're like,
also,
yeah,
if you look, and this is only something I realized when I went back and watched. I mean, you see it more and more, I think, over the course of the episodes. Not a spoiler, just like in general. But when I went back and rewatched the first episode, you really see like the facial expressions that Oscar Isaac makes, like the very subtle facial expressions. Like if you pay attention, you can see the moment he changes from Steven to Mark, and it's so subtle, but like if you catch it, it's just really it's cool. It's like, because you can see the moment the character switch goes like that, which is what it's supposed to be. Like it happens, and instead he just takes over his body, and it's a totally different person. It's
crazy. It's so brilliant between the acting and the editing. Michael Lee, how did you feel about that editing and that choice of how they portrayed the transitions?
I think those transitions are a brilliant way to show off those moments, like with those moment to moment scenes because there is these times where we don't see the action, and then there are times where we do see it, and that I love how that was all tied in together, I guess, stitched up in its mad, scientist sort of way, and that just adds to the whole horror aspect, because you want to know what's going on, but you don't know, and then all of a sudden, one moment he's clean, and the moment he has blood on his hands. And then he has another moment he's smashing a cupcake in the guy's face. So like, what's going on? And I want to know, and we'll probably never know. But at that point, that just adds to like, okay, we can fill in our own ideas, or just adds to the whole mystery of it all. And I like that.
Yeah, it's like a little unsettling too. You're just like, I don't know where we're at right now, but like I want to know, but I don't want to know. Exactly like you said. Like, this is a little scary, but I'm also really intrigued, but I'm also a little terrified. Yeah, it's fantastic. Again, speaks to like the brilliance of the writing and the acting and the editing. But in this moment, right around here is where we kind of get to know Harrow a little more. He does that weird thing where he's talking to people and he's got the scales on his hand and he's all like judging people. And then he's like, oh, you're good. And then that old lady just like kills her. He's like, nah, you're probably going to do something bad in the future and you're just going to die. And it's like, what is going on? He starts to kind of explain. Amit like can see what's going to happen. And you sort of get this background on him and what his people and his followers believe. And it's scary because they even get into a conversation in another episode, kind of more in depth as to what lengths they'll go to. But Andrea, how did you feel about getting to know Harrow here and kind of what he's doing with the scales?
So obviously I know the cast of the show. I know who Ethan Hawke is going to play. And I am not kidding when I say, like, when he showed up on screen with that scene, I literally stared at him going, like, who is this person? Because it took me, I was so in just everything happening with the show and like following everything so intently. It literally took me like 20 seconds to realize that was him and his character, because he looks completely different. Talk about like transforming into your character. It's like everything from like his voice to his makeup, his hair, like that was just like, wow, like you're creepy. Like just looking at you would creep me out. Like, I don't know why people would want to go have their futures read, but I guess when you're a cult leader, and I guess when you're a part of some cult, and really, or some kind of, thing like that, it's very, you don't have a problem with that. But I thought it was it was a good way to be introduced to the type of character that he is, because I think, he could go either way, especially in those when you first meet him. But then like once he kills that old woman and once he, gets really into Steven's face and is like, you're going to give me back what I need, it becomes very clear that, oh, you are not going to mess with this person. And I thought his first introduction was just brilliant.
Michael Lee, how did you feel about that whole scene and getting to kind of know what he's up to and his little cult, as Andrea put it?
I mean, it's like, how does someone, I guess we're going to get the psychology of these followers. Like, how do they follow him? How do you follow someone that you could possibly end up dead? It's like, okay, that's interesting. So that's what I liked about his character, because he can amass these kind of followers, and whether they're willing to live or die for him, sort of thing. But as for Hawke himself, he pretty much carries off that persona just by the look and the movements and the way he interacts with his other followers. It's just pretty dark, and I really liked how you get those nuances between the voice and the way he walks, the way he uses his cane, or how he comforts his followers into believing, you can come towards me, sort of, and you'll be judged, and they don't know, and they're just willing to accept it. So yeah.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, I might die. Okay, cool. Like, I don't know. It speaks to the manipulation, and he's so subtly terrifying, right? Like, you look at him and you're like, there's something off.
Yeah.
But then it's so subtle at the same time, because he, like you said, the way he talks, he's like comforting, and you're like, I still don't trust you. There's something going on with you. I thought it was a great introduction. But then one of my favorite parts is that in this episode is when Steven wakes up and he goes about his business. He's like, oh, my fish only has one fin. What's going on here? Let me take it to the pet store. And why did this fin grow back? And they're like, well, I talked to you yesterday. Then he goes on his date and he realizes he's lost literal days, which I thought was a really great way to show just how much control Mark can have sometimes. It's not just these quick moments, which is what maybe you're led to believe at first. It is like, can be full days. Andrea, how did you feel about that kind of reveal?
Well, it also, I think, helped, like, that kind of thing, once we get to that point in the story, helps us understand so much about the Steven that we saw at the beginning of the episode, why he has such a hard time connecting, why people are exasperated with him and his work. And, because you realize when he's having these episodes, maybe he's blacking out for at some point a day or a few hours, but other times he's probably blacking out for 2 to 3 days, and and he doesn't know, and maybe he's just never known what's happened, and he's just gotten up and gone to work, and that's been the end of it. But it made me sad, when he's sitting there with his date, and then he has to eat steak by himself, and they're going to close the kitchen, and he's just he's trying so hard, and I just felt so bad for him in that moment. And I think what we were saying before, it's you empathize with Steven and with the control that Mark really has on him. And how hard that is when all he wants to do is just live a normal life.
And I did like how they kind of made it a big deal that he was a vegan. They mentioned it a few times, and then he's like, I'll just have a steak. Yeah. And you're like, what is he doing? I thought he was vegan. Why does he want steak? And I thought that part was funny too, when they're like, it's that Marvel humor when they ask how does he want it done and what cut? He's like, the good cut. I want it done right, to taste good. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. Michael Lee, how did you feel about this? Is kind of an eye opener into who this Steven character is and what he's been dealing with for who knows how long.
Yeah, so about that whole thing, the length of days, it all expands because it doesn't turn the whole flipping thing that we had, not that flip event, but the whole switching thing, those during the car chase scenes, as a gimmick. We get to see a more expansive version of that, and that's what I think is great, because now there are even more missing parts to this story that we need to know about. And I just thought that it's a great way to see how extensive and how I guess damaging it is to his life, Steven's life at least. So.
And then things get crazier, and he finds the cell phone in his house, and a key to a storage unit. And I love that he's going through the phone, and it's Layla. Then it was was it DeCamp or some other name that I don't think we know much about?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Layla, and she calls, and he's all like, she's like, what is this accent you're doing? What's going on? Mark. And then he gets the name Mark, and he's like, who is Mark? And it's so, again, you feel bad for him. Like, you can tell he's just like so confused holding the phone. Like, I don't know what's happening here. I don't know. That part to me, I was like, okay, things are crazy. Like, you almost feel like Marvel was kind of telling you what was going on, and then they're like, and now we're throwing something else in the mix, and now you're not going to know even more of what's going on. Andrea, how did you feel when you found that phone and Layla was calling him?
Well, I feel like what you're saying, which is like this whole show so far has been like, you think you know what's happening, and then you don't, and then something else will happen, and it's really those twists and turns are what really make it so fun. Because not only is just like the amount that you can pack into an episode in terms of reveals and storytelling, but like if I think about like from the moment like the episode started and what we know about Steven to like where, you know, we are at that point when he finds the phone and, you know, when he sees Layla's call and he finds the key and he realizes, you know, he's starting to like put the pieces together about this other person or this other life. It feels like we've gone on this like whole journey of like who this character is and what he's gone through. And like you said, I felt so bad when he was so confused. He just, you know, she's pissed at him because she doesn't know any better. She thinks he's Mark, and he's like sitting there with a little accent, and he's like, I don't know what you mean. And I just want to.
He's like, I just found this phone in my flat, and I'm trying to figure out who.
Like, I understand you, Steven.
It's so crazy, and they've done it all in 40 minutes. Like, what is happening? It's crazy. Michael Lee, how did you feel about that kind of twist when he finds the phone and starts talking to Layla and doesn't know what the heck is going on?
I thought it played wonderfully to the whole genre hopping show within 40 minutes, because it starts from, you know, sleep, psychological deprivation kind of thriller to mystery and spies, because, you know, what's this key and the cell phone doing here, and who am I calling, and why is this person attacking me all of a sudden? I'm just a guy trying to figure out my life. So I found that particularly wonderful, that it was so seamless how they've been able to jump from these different genres so seamlessly and within a 40-minute time frame, and still feel like there's nothing lost on you. It still just goes into this whole perplexing mystery box, I guess, of Marvel. So yeah. Yeah,
even though it's like you said, a bunch of genres, it's like still cohesive and it still makes sense, even though it like doesn't make sense. It all fits, like exactly like you said. But then they jump right back to horror, because I will tell you, when he runs out into that hallway and he's trying to go in the elevator and Conchu's like coming down the thing, and then it's the old lady and he's on the ground again with the Marvel humor. I lost my contact. You're like, what is happening? And the old lady's like, my friend knows I'm coming. Like, don't attack me, you crazy man. That whole scene. And then we even get a crazier hallway scene next episode, which we'll talk about. But I was so scared in that moment with Conchu just coming up. It literally terrified me. Andrea, how did you feel about that whole hallway scene and elevator scene?
So the first thing in my mind was like, this is just very like Night at the Museum. Like, literally the first thing in my mind, which like, it's the only thing I could think of. But like you're saying, like that elevator scene, like I love that. It was like, and the old lady clearly being like, okay, I'm just gonna go and now, and like clearly did not want anything to do with them, like that, like Marvel, like you were saying, like that Marvel humor, which by the way, I'm realizing all the cool Marvel humor moments happen in elevators and Disney Plus shows, apparently.
That's true.
Between Loki and Hawkeye and now Moon Knight.
No, yeah.
But that scene was just it was just fun and it was cool, and like you said, it was terrifying. Like, you know, you're watching him get chased through this hallway and you know that he, you know, at that point, like it's not like he's not a superhero, you know, he doesn't know anything. So you're really worried that he's gonna, you know, knock over this one vase and then he's gonna be screwed. But like it really, like you were saying, the whole horror aspect and like just the whole really dark like aspect of it really comes out during that whole scene.
Michael Lee, how did you feel about, like, because I feel like that's kind of also, is that our first like close-up-ish look at Khonshu? I think we get a little bit of him like behind him when he's away. That might be the first like
I think so.
real close-up look. How did you feel about that, Michael?
I felt that, I guess the god design, the deity design was pretty on point. It's like, oh my gosh, there's this, pigeon head, dressed, all draped in white with holding a staff. Is like, what's going on? If I were him, I would just be terrified, and because we all could relate to Steven. Yeah, that just amplifies things even more. I especially like the play on the lights, just how it just evokes this sort of fear that you don't know what's going on. Everything's flickering, and the whole dinginess and dirtiness of the elevator itself. It's just like, okay, this is just adds more to the creepiness and the vibe. So yeah.
And then I love when Harrow like follows him to work, basically, right? And he's talking to him there, and we get again with the Marvel humor. I'm sorry, there is one I backed up like 6 times to watch, and I laughed every single time. And it was that Avatar moment when he's like trying to explain to him that he's, there's avatars, and he's like, oh, the blue people, yeah. And he's like, no, that's not what I meant. He goes, oh, the anime. And I was like, oh, like, it's so stupid, but it's so funny. And I was like, it doesn't get old, right? It's that Marvel humor that I love that they throw that in there. But at the same time, Harrow's here trying to explain about Amit. Like, even when he talks about Amit, he's like, do you know Amit? He's like, not personally. I'm like, oh my gosh. I just loved Steven and Harrow in that moment. Their banter was so funny. But at the same time, you're really, truly getting to know a little bit more about Harrow, right? We saw a little bit earlier, he was doing the scales. Now he's really kind of explaining a little bit of, we're working with Amit, like, the gods betrayed her, they encapsulated her, and we're going to try to help her, and we need to help her. So that's why I need the scarab. Just give it back to me. And Steven's still like, I don't have the scarab, so I don't know why you're talking to me. And then, of course, that he sees all the people around, like there was the photographer lady, and she like flashes her tattoo. Like they all show. You realize this is a little bit bigger, I think, than he thought it was at first, right? He realizes not only is it real, he's got a whole ton of followers. How did you feel about that banter, Andrea, and kind of that, it feels like a true Marvel moment in the Moon Knight.
Well, it does, because in one sense, you're getting the backstory that, I don't know if I should say backstory, but like you're getting the confirmation that, this is real. He's realizing this is real. This is not just a dream. This guy is real. The thing when I experience being like chased through the streets and some guy killing people by reading their futures with scales, that's real. Like this guy really exists. And you're grappling with that and how he must feel. And then on the other side of it, you get those like that humor that you're laughing at those, those little jokes that that are just gonna like help the mood of your help your mood, even when you're like so confused. You're looking at that like, okay, like you can bring this back down to like a relatable level. But I thought it was very smart the way that they kind of plotted out the first episode, and that like having him see Harrow in like a dream and having his first interaction with him be that dreamlike, moment where he does think he's dreaming, and then follow it up with, oh no, you're real. Like instead of like having him seeing him in like the real world and just having him show up, and like that really, this scene really drives home how dangerous he is and how terrifying he is. And like, you were saying not to throw this back to anything that I like, but like I feel like the like some of the creepiest characters are the ones, especially in Marvel, are like they're not the gods or or Thanos. They're the people like Harrow or like Dreykov and Black Widow, who are just like the normal people who are just creepy because they are creepy people with weird beliefs and like can prey on like people and scare you, and so like those kinds of villains I think have always been like the more like creepy and weird and just fun to watch.
Well, I think because they could be real.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
it's
like a real.
we probably don't have him coming down to snap a finger and like kill half of
Right.
us. So this guy, a cult leader, it can happen. It does happen. Michael Lee, how did you feel about just that kind of conversation between Steven and Harrow, and getting a little bit more of the backstory, but also bringing out that Marvel humor, talking about avatars, multiple types.
Multiple types, multiple different, iterations of an avatar, or, different viewpoints. But I felt a sense of dread, like there was something was about to go down in the worst possible way for Steven. And if he didn't get out of there, that, Harrow is going to literally unleash some hell, I guess, on Steven for not giving him the scarab. And what I appreciated about, from getting to that point is how we ended up in the hallway sort of thing. And then he just all of a sudden just woke up. Again, it just goes into this whole idea of, what is this a fugue state? Is this reality? We don't know what kind of perception or what state of mind he's in at the time. And again, that plays into how well this show is written, because it keeps you guessing and it keeps you thinking, where, what viewpoint are we seeing this from? So yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I do kind of love that they had him sort of read his scales, and he's like, whoa, there's chaos in you. And he almost seems like a little like, what's going on? Like the fact that Harrow was a little taken aback, obviously that plays into a few episodes later down the road, what he kind of got from Steven there. But I did like that he had that moment with him rather than Steven just running away before Harrow was able to read his scales. But then we get into the craziness, and the jackal shows up and it chases him through the freaking museum. He ends up in the bathroom, and you see probably, again, one of my favorite moments is when he's arguing with himself in the mirror, and Mark's just like, let me out. I can take care of this. Like, I've done this before. You don't know what you're doing. Let me out. And when he finally does, you finally get to see Moon Knight, which we hadn't seen yet, in his full costume, just beating the crud out of this jackal, which I thought was very interesting. I didn't think the CGI was perfect, but I'm okay with it because I get that it's supposed to be this like mythically creature type thing, not an actual real like animal. So I can let that slide. Plus it was terrifying, so I'll allow it. And then you get that final shot is just on his face. And the episode ends because, of course, that's what Marvel likes to do. They're like, here, this really cool, interesting thing happened, and now we're going to stop, and you're going to have to wait a week. Andrea, how did you feel about this whole finally seeing Moon Knight, the Jackal, and, of course, Marvel ending on a cliffhanger? Surprise, surprise.
Really? I would never have guessed they were going to do that. I was very surprised, actually, they showed the full suit and our first look at Moon Knight, because I guess if I look back, like, yeah, it makes sense to reveal that at the end of the episode, but also it wasn't like I went through the whole episode thinking, like, I hope we're going to get a look at, the actual characters. And, like, I just figured that would come down the line and, maybe, like, in the next episode or in the third episode, or, like, they would build up to it, because it is such, like, an iconic look, and it's something people have obviously been waiting for, and it's such a, especially when he takes over, it's such like a shift of character, and so I was actually really surprised when, and this is coming from me, like someone who, it's not like I went like, I hope they show the suit, yeah. Like, because I know it, but when they got to the end and they finally, showed that full reveal, I was like, yes, like I was excited because it just felt so cool, and I was so excited they were like showing us that so early, because it means obviously, that means we're going to see it a lot more down the line. And,
yeah.
Like if you're showing it, right now at the end of the first episode. And I thought it was a great way to end the first episode, because it ends on a cliffhanger, but it also ends on this really cool moment when you're like, well, what was that? And now I have to tune in next week to find out what happens, and see if like we see more of this guy. And there really are two guys in there. And, and it's, it's brutal and fun. I loved it. I just thought it was a really cool way to end the episode.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I love just seeing him just beat the crud out of it from the back, that shot, which we do see in the trailer, but I still was excited to see it in place in the episode, because sometimes we get things in the trailers that we don't actually get in the episode. So I was glad that we did get that. Michael Lee, how did you feel about the ending to episode 1?
I can't add any more than what you guys already said. I thought it was really nice to see, refreshing to see again some of the brutality and how far Marvel can push that envelope in terms of showing how they can throw a beat down on one of the villains or at least one of the jackals. So yeah, it's really interesting to see that Marvel just wants to take this to a whole nother level.
Yeah, I can appreciate it. And it does feel like it. I've seen a lot of people, one of the things when I put out my initial thoughts, a lot of people were like, yeah, but is it really brutal? Is it really that way? And I'm like, for what we've gotten for MCU, absolutely it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely, which I love about it. Speaking of loving things, if you have to pick, and it's so hard, and we're going to try to do this every episode, but if you could pick a favorite part of this episode, favorite part, Andrea, what is it? Favorite scene or favorite part? I know it's hard.
Okay. I don't know. You know what I really love? This is going to sound so dorky, but I love like just seeing Stephen working at the gift shop and like when he uses his knowledge to like try to say like these aren't like accurate, like I forget like what the actual quote is, but he's like trying to like explain like because he's just this little knowledgeable dork, and like I love that so much. And it was those like little tiny moments that made me like that's what's making me fall in love with the character as someone who doesn't know much about the character, like to be like super invested in going into this series.
Yeah, so like you're talking about when he has that poster and he's like, there's a problem. There's 9 of them. There's only 7 on this poster. Yeah. Like, I'm not digging at marketing, but
I was just like, it was just so endearing. And like, I could watch a whole show about you working in the gift shop. I want to visit your gift shop and I want you to sell me things. I will buy them. I'll go on a date with you.
I'll eat steak. It's okay. It'll be great. Michael Lee, what was your favorite part of this episode?
I would have to say the first time, or the few times at least, that you got to see that Stephen converses with Mark. Yeah, Mark. Yeah, because when we first see it, it's like you can't go any further than this. Don't do anymore. You're going to get yourself in trouble. It's like, what's going on? And then you get into the later stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, this guy's real. Like, what's going? This is so twisted and so psychologically and mind bending and everything like that. So that's what I appreciated about the show, that it was able to tease a little bit of that whole duality of the character.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree. I love just they're so unique and smart in the little things that he'll see his reflection in. And it continues throughout the series, like random things he'll just see his reflection in and start talking to himself. And it's really, they really, push the envelope there. And it's not always a mirror, right? It's not always just one thing. It's very, very smart things throughout. If I had to choose a favorite thing, it's probably like the first reveal of Khonshu, I think, because that was really cool to see. And I was like, oh, they pulled it off. Like they really pulled it off. He's terrifying. And the voice is so scary. And just the whole thing, the whole horror. And it's like floating. It's like his head is like, there's no neck.
Yeah, I think it took me, I don't know how long it took me to realize that like the head actually is floating. And I was like, this is even more creepy now.
Yeah, it's just little things like that. Like Marvel they've been killing it with the shows and they're continuing to kill it. And that's what we're going to end it off with. It's very, very hard. It's so hard to rank because they're all so different. Like you said, Andrea, they really are. But just an overall, like, is this one of your favorite shows? How does it, I know for you, Hawkeye is like always going to be.
Can't top it. I'm sorry. I can, not put my archers number one. But no, I mean, but I'm enjoying it a lot more than in like the first episode. Like I enjoy it a lot more than I thought I would, just because I expected to enjoy it, but not when you don't know a character and you're just going in blind off of the things that you've read or the backstories that you've read, but you don't have like an attachment to them or you haven't seen them in the MCU before. It's very hard to be like, oh, well, I'm really looking forward to this, for this reason, like aside from the fact that it's a Marvel show that stars someone really talented and it's going to be really cool. So, I mean, I think right now it's sort of teetering on like that middle, like where if like I put Hawkeye and WandaVision are kind of always going to be like some of the top for me. But Moon Knight, I would put like pretty much right under that at this point, because it's just different and fun. And and I'm enjoying it so much more than I thought I would.
How about you, Michael Lee?
I would have to say it's in the top 3, like next to like Loki and WandaVision, because it's just so different from the typical, straightforward spy shows or straightforward Die Hard sort of thing like we got in Hawkeye, or the, political thriller thing that we got in Falcon and Winter Soldier. So it's just kind of new because it's just mind bending. I appreciate more of the mind bending stuff, and I like the other genre stuff that Marvel has been doing as well. But I tend to lean more into this sort of state that they've been doing right now. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree, because for me, horror is like probably my favorite genre. Like I love to be terrified. So this is definitely top 3 for me. I love just being scared. And this show does it right off the bat from episode 1. And spoiler, guys, it continues to terrify as it goes on. That's it for this week, you guys. I'm Tessa Smith. You guys can find me everywhere at Mama's Geeky, mamasgeeky.com, Mama's Geeky on social. Andrea, why don't you let everyone know again real quick where they can find you?
I'm Andrea. You can find me on Twitter at _ATowers. You can also find me writing mostly at entertainmentweekly.ew.com and also sometimes at IGN.
And Michael Lee?
Hi, you can. I'm Michael Lee, and then you can find me at. Oh, there we go. This one. You can find me at I am Michael J. Lee on all socials: Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed talking Moon Knight with us. We're going to be back for the next 5 weeks. So we will see you next week for Moon Knight episode 2. Thanks, guys.